When stress shows up in your body, have you ever noticed different physical symptoms that maybe don't necessarily have a rhyme or reason why you're experiencing those physical symptoms? Maybe you've even gone to the doctor and they've run tests and labs and x-rays and things like that, and they can't explain why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. And your symptoms actually exist. It's not just in your head, right? What we're going to talk about in today's video is the fact that stress doesn't just reside in your head, it actually resides in your body, physiologically, all throughout your body. And it's not a sign of failure or weakness. It's basically a nervous system pattern that served a particular purpose and function, at least at one point in your life, and was actually a helpful thing. And maybe it's just not helpful anymore. We're going to talk about that. And if you've ever felt confused by symptoms, such as what I referenced earlier, going to the doctor, getting tests run, and things like that, and we're like, the doctors are like, we don't know what's going on. Hopefully, this video will reframe what perhaps your body might be indicating and give you some more awareness and clarity as to what might be going on with some of those physical symptoms. So let's get into it. So this first slide states that this video is about understanding and bringing more awareness to you. It's not about blaming. Okay, because I know sometimes people will blame themselves when they start learning more about the mind-body connection. Sometimes people feel like they're failing themselves. You might have felt that way yourself. And, putting a lot of pressure on yourself as to, why you might be experiencing physical symptoms, especially if there is an emotional component. So this is not about blaming. It's about bringing more understanding. So your body is not malfunctioning. Even if it's experiencing difficult physical symptoms, it's not malfunctioning per se. It's often giving you signals. And so symptoms are not a sign of weakness, as I mentioned earlier. And these stress responses that happen in your body are adaptive. Your body is adapting to the environment around you. It has been doing that since you were born, even before you were born, when you're in your mother's womb. Your body is designed, physiologically designed to perceive your environment and respond accordingly and adapt to that environment. So there's nothing wrong happening here. Okay. This is about bringing understanding of what actually is happening. So stress doesn't always stay emotional. It doesn't always stay in your head. It actually gets into your body, and it might manifest as things such as this list here, such as tight shoulders, issues with your digestion, gut issues such as that might be presenting as irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, perhaps more chronic symptoms of the gut. Things like, and even more minor things like just intermittent diarrhea or constipation or things like that. Fatigue is another common symptom that is often associated with emotional components that are contributing to your physical symptoms. Headaches are another one. This is something that I notice personally. That's one of the stress patterns that tends to run in my body when I have those stress patterns showing up. Chronic tension is another one. I see this often happening in the hip flexors and the jaw. Do you ever notice that? You ever go to the dentist and they ask you, do you grind your teeth at night or something like that? There's usually, kind of hot spots in the body where there's a higher propensity or a tendency to hold that stress that can actually be underlying emotional stress. So why is your body doing this? You might be asking yourself, why is my body doing this? Maybe you've worked on your mindset. Maybe you've done a lot of personal growth and development. You've overcome a lot of things in your life. You understand your patterns and you've worked really hard to reduce stress. And maybe you're currently doing that. You're doing all the right things, right? You're eating right, you're sleeping right, you're drinking right, you're drinking, plenty of fluids and water. You're reducing or eliminating alcohol and or caffeine. You're having, exercising regularly, doing strength training, cardiovascular health, all these things that are very beneficial for reducing stress and just overall longevity. And yet things are still popping up in your body. physically. You're like, what is going on here? What am I doing wrong? Right? Stress moves through your nervous system. Stress moves through your body. And it's not just thoughts. Stress doesn't show up in just your thoughts, although those can definitely be a source of stress, right? I'm sure you can relate to that. Not just emotions, but physiology as a whole. And by the way, emotions are physiological. I know I mentioned that in a handful of other videos as well. I never learned that in graduate school. I have a licensed clinical counseling or a clinical counseling license, and I never learned that in school. I learned that more when I started studying and really yearning to understand the science behind emotions and why people do the things that they do, even though they don't want to do them, right? Like, why do people actually get stuck? Why do I get stuck? Why do my clients get stuck? I started learning more about the science of emotions. It's very fascinating. So, anyway, the nervous system, the stress moving through your nervous system, it's a whole body response. And so the nervous system communicates with the body constantly. There's constant communication. There's cellular communication. There is organs and glands communication. There's constant communication happening throughout your body at all times. In your muscles, in your digestion, in your hormones, in your energy levels, all of those things. So it's a whole body response that's happening. It's not just in your head. And so think of the nervous system like a messenger. And when stress happens, the message doesn't stop at the brain. It actually enters the body, or it is actually delivered throughout the body, right? It's almost as if you get pinged with, like a text message, for example, if you're getting pinged on your cell phone, you're getting a lot of notifications coming through with different text messages, and you can silence your notifications, right? You can silence your text messages. You can put your phone on do not disturb for a while, right? We can't do that with our bodies. We might try to. We might try to suppress things by overexerting ourselves or getting really distracted in our work or drinking alcohol excessively or doing whatever it is that's going to actually keep our minds off things. And yet it actually just pops up in your body because your body does not have a do not disturb setting. It just doesn't work. We as humans, we want to move towards pleasure and away from pain. And so if something is causing pain in the body, we want to just flip a switch or do what we can to numb that pain, whether it's constructive or destructive, right? But the body doesn't work that way. It doesn't work like our cell phones where we can silence those notifications. When stress happens, it is communicating in the body and through the body. And so stress, nervous system, body, right? We experience stress. The nervous system is interpreting the information and is delivering it throughout your body. So your nervous system's job, its number one job, is to protect you, to make sure that you're safe, to make sure that you survive. That's the number one job. And the nervous system is fast. It responds to any kind of perceived threat. And when I say threat, it's not necessarily like this life-threatening type of thing. It's not always a threat as in my life is in danger here. It can be like my identity is in danger. My outward validation from others is in danger. My sense of security is in danger. My sense of self-esteem is in danger. My sense of what people are thinking of me is in danger. It doesn't have to be this life-threatening thing, although it could be. But it doesn't always have to be that way. So it responds to your perceived threat, what you're perceiving to be emotionally true, right? So this doesn't always even equate with actual reality. It's about your perception. So when you're perceiving yourself to be in an environment where maybe you're being scrutinized, for example, and let's say you are in that environment and someone's body language, you kind of pick up on their body language and you interpret that as they're scrutinizing me, they're criticizing me, they're judging me. When in reality, they are not doing that at all. And so it doesn't matter if what is actually factually happening, it matters how we're unconsciously interpreting this. We're not going around thinking about what we're thinking about and being like, am am I interpreting this correctly? It's just an automatic thing, right? And so with that automation that happens in your brain, in my brain, the nervous system responds to that and will give you a specific signal or an emotion like, hey, you're being threatened here, right? This is all unconscious. It's just happening below the surface. But it's constantly prioritizing your safety. And again, not just your physical safety. It could be your emotional safety. It could be your sense of identity. It could be your sense of, like I said, how others are perceiving you, all of those things. And it learns from past experiences as well. So what shapes your lens? It's almost as if you just a pair of my grab a pair of my handy dandy glasses here. So this is representative of my perception, the lens that I look through. Okay, so when I put these on, these are just blue light blocking glasses, by the way. But anyway, when I put these on, things look maybe slightly different or, very different, especially if it was a prescription lens, right? The lens that we look through, that the way in which you perceive the world is very much dictated by what you experienced yesterday, last year, the last 10 years, and actually more specifically and especially the first 7 years of your life. That radically shapes how you perceive the world. And again, this is not something that you sign up for at birth. Like, hey, I want to have a worldview that's very narrow, and I want to have a worldview that's very judgmental, and I want to have a worldview that's very scarcity mindset. Nobody signs up for that, right? It's something that gets programmed into us. And then now here we are walking around looking through this lens, whether we like the lens that we're looking through or not. Here it is, right? There's a way that we can change the prescription or the lens that you're looking through. And that's another topic for another time. And we're going to get into that later in another video. But my point here in sharing this, eyeglasses demonstration is that, again, your nervous system is constantly scanning your environment for, am I safe here? Am I emotionally safe here? Can I let my guard down? And here's another example. The example that I wrote here is if you've ever jumped, I'm so notorious for this. If you've ever jumped at a loud noise before realizing that you're safe, that's your nervous system doing its job and it's automatic, right? Your body reacts before your mind can even take in that information. So let me give you a personal example. This happens often in my home. I'm in my home. It's a safe environment. Let's say, for example, this is where it often happens in my bedroom. The door is closed. My husband comes in and he's usually just kind of, just like, just opens the door really fast. And I just jump almost always, even if I know he's coming. Sometimes I will just, my mind is like, oh, here he comes and it's safe or whatever. Usually I actually don't hear him coming, but regardless, even if I don't hear him coming and he, opens the door, it kind of jolts my body and I will jump, even if my brain knows that I'm safe, right? So sometimes, you have this knee-jerk reaction where your body responds automatically before your brain has enough time to catch up to say, hey, body, don't jump when your husband walks through the bedroom door, And so again, these are just automatic things that happen, and it's prioritizing your survival and your protection. And again, the nervous system is always going to choose protection first above everything else. Even if there's something that's like, let's say, for example, your mind is like, I want to do this thing, or I want to feel this certain way in this kind of environment. And you know that you're safe in that environment. And yet you default automatically back to the old behavior, the old pattern. It's because the things that you experienced in the past, they're basically wired to things that fire together, wire together. I'm not sure if you've heard of that phrase before. Things that fire together, wire together. In other words, the things that you've experienced in the past, maybe there was a situation that you had coupled with the emotion that was difficult, not a good kind of feeling emotion. And that kind of like gets merged together. It's almost like it's braided, right? it's challenging to separate that initially. And so now you're wanting to feel and experience that same kind of thing in a new way, but your body just keeps going back to that familiar pattern, even if it doesn't feel good. And this one would feel good, right? It's prioritizing protection and it defaults to that familiar pattern. There's a way to change that, by the way. We're going to talk about that later. When stress isn't resolved, the body then adapts so that life can continue. When stress isn't resolved, the body adapts so that life can continue. So muscles staying slightly braced, for example, this is what sometimes will show up like physically in your body, right? Digestion is shifting priorities. It's like, oh, something stressful is happening. So we're going to kind of sort of shut down a little bit here. We're going to conserve our energy because the stress is happening and we're trying to adapt and we're trying to survive. Maybe sensitivity increases in certain systems or certain situations. There's a lot of different ways that this shows up. Here's another example. If you've ever carried a heavy bag for a duration of time, for a while, right? Your shoulder might stay tense even after you put it down. I've seen this actually happen. I worked for a chiropractor many years ago, and I remember, women that would tend to, carry a baby on one of their hips, for example, or they would carry a heavy purse on one shoulder. They're constantly just that was a kind of a common thing where they would always put it over their right shoulder, for example, and they would carry it around. And even if it wasn't heavy, it was, maybe 5, 6 pounds or whatever. It's, still weighing down on the shoulder. And over time, that body, the shoulder's like, oh, this is how we are now. We're going to just constrict and we're going to stay tense. We're going to stay tight. Even if you stop carrying a purse, your baby is now grown up. You're not carrying a baby on your hip anymore. And the body has these patterns that continually repeat. And so it's not that the tension is wrong. It's not that the tension is wrong. It's just the body taking time to reset, to reorient itself, to come back to homeostasis and equilibrium and, structural balance. So sometimes the original stress has passed a few days, a few months, years sometimes, and the nervous system still hasn't yet received the message that, oh, we can fully stand down now. Oh, we can let our guard down now. Oh, we can actually release and melt the tension because we don't need to brace ourselves for that heavy person anymore. So sometimes it takes a while for that message to actually be clear to the body. So that's partly what could be happening here as well. So have you ever been dismissed by a provider, let's say, a doctor, for example, and you're left feeling invalidated? You're like, I just explained and shared all of these symptoms to my doctor. They ran the tests. The labs came back normal. X-rays came back normal. Functional MRI came back normal. And yet you have these symptoms. You're experiencing these symptoms. It's not all in your head. And you might feel that way sometimes with different practitioners, especially if they're not very empathetic and maybe they don't have great bedside manners. They're not really like practicing attunement with you. You might feel like they're just kind of sending you this message like, oh, it's all in your head, right? The symptoms are real. The sensations that you experience are real. And the body is responding to the signals that are biological and physiological. And again, oftentimes, this is the missing link that I've seen so often with my clients, especially when they've done all the labs and everything comes back normal. The most common missing link is underlying emotional stress that's actually exasperating, or even in some cases, and I've seen many cases, causing the physical symptoms. And there's no lab that runs tests for, hey, do you have suppressed anger that's causing this breast pain and this burning sensation in your chest? No, we don't have labs that run, chemistry of emotional toxicity in our body. And yet that is a very, very, very common reason why we experience these unpleasant physical symptoms in our bodies. So just because something is psychological does not mean that it's imaginary. because if something is nervous system based, it doesn't mean that you're making it up, right? You're actually feeling the sensations in your body. And just because there is a mind body connection, if there is a mind body connection, it doesn't mean that there's any kind of personal failure on your part. Just like I mentioned earlier, there's nothing that you're doing wrong. Okay. This is a lot of this is about really recognizing and noticing and becoming aware that, wow, this is actually a thing. This is something that so many other people experience, and maybe not many people talk about it as much. I think there's more talk about it. I am noticing that there are more practitioners that are, sharing more messages like this, that are bringing more awareness. I think that awareness level is being raised, which is very, very valuable. But sometimes we overlook that, right? So if your heart, here's another example. If your heart races during stress, that doesn't mean that you imagined it, right? Oh, you're full of it. Oh, you're just imagining things. Your heart is literally like beating outside of your chest. If you put a heart rate monitor on, it's like, oh, it's beating at like, 160 beats per minute. You're not making it up. You're feeling it. And it means that your nervous system is activated and it's having an actual, real physical, physiological response. And these real symptoms that you're experiencing, they have roots in your nervous system. They're rooted in your nervous system. So they're not made up. And your body learned a pattern, just like I mentioned before. There's a time for a certain reason to keep you safe. There was a time and a place and a purpose where it had really, in most cases, positive, maybe life-saving function. And that pattern no longer matches what your current environment is. And so intellectually, you're like, okay, body, you can relax now. I'm in a safe environment. And the body's like, we're not so sure. We don't feel very safe. And you can you can even have a conversation, an intellectual conversation with your body. And you could be, telling your body like, hey, chill out. This happened like 10 years ago. And the body's like, we don't respond to logic. We don't respond to logic. We're still experiencing the pings, right? Like the text messages coming through saying something's wrong here. We don't have a do not disturb silence button. We're still experiencing hypervigilance. We're still experiencing activation. So no matter how much you tell me logically that you're safe, I don't feel safe, right? The body needs to begin to feel safe. Feel safe, not in a logical sense. So the nervous system learns from experience, which we've already talked about that. And when something happens repeatedly, especially when it happens repeatedly or intensely, it could be a one-time thing, but it was really intense. The body remembers how to respond, even after the situation changes, right? So these are kind of like habitual things that override your conscious thinking brain. So what does pattern mean here? So a pattern is a familiar response. It's a predictable body reaction. So for example, the familiar pattern in one of the examples I gave before is, oh, putting the 5-pound purse on your right shoulder. That's a familiar response. The response is like the body clenches up, the shoulder tenses up, right? So there's a predictable body reaction, like the shoulder is just like, okay, we're going to stay tense. We need to stay tense. We need to stay tense to hold that purse up so it doesn't slide and slip off, your arm. And that's the shortcut that the nervous system uses. Once it creates that pattern, that pathway, it's like, oh, this is what we do now. This is what we do. And it's not a conscious choice. You have to be very intentional consciously to reverse that, but there's an easier way to actually bypass the conscious thinking brain. And again, we're going to get more into that in future videos. But here's another example. If you've ever driven the same route, let's say, for example, you commute to work, you drive and you take the same path, the same route to work for years. Your body just knows it automatically. You get in your car and it's almost as if you're kind of in a hypnotic state and you can mindlessly just drive. You don't have to think about where you're going. Your mind and your body actually just drives you to work, right? And sometimes you might even get to work and be like, what was I even thinking about when I got here? Like my mind was just kind of somewhere else, right? You don't have to be intentional about where you're going versus showing up to a completely new environment And, maybe you're following GPS, you have to be like very mindful, like, do I turn right here? Where's the sign? What do you're very intentional about it. It's very different than the autopilot of taking the same route to work every day. I'll give you an example. When I was living in Northern California, I lived there for like 20 years, and I worked at a full-time job during the day. I was working as a clinician for children in schools. And then I had a private practice that I went to in most of the evenings, not every single afternoon or evening, but a lot of the afternoons and evenings. So usually on my drive home from my full-time job to my part-time practice, I just automatically had the same path that I took all the time, right? I would just exit on this freeway and go south to go to my office. And I remember one day where it was the weekend and I was about to go hiking in San Francisco. So I jump on the freeway, I exit and I start going south. And then I realized I had this light bulb moment, like, this is not the way to San Francisco. Like I need to be heading west. And it was one of those autopilot things where my body was so accustomed to every single time I get in my car, this is the direction I go. This is the path I take. This is the way that I go. This is very similar to how neural pathways work in your brain and how these patterns work in your nervous system. It's like, this is the path we take all the time. I had to reroute myself and, get on a different freeway to actually go to a different destination. But again, that's just another example of how this autopilot type of thing shows up. And so you don't decide per se, you just do, right? So what the body learned though, so if it learned to take that same pathway, it learned to constrict the shoulder all the time, it can relearn. It can actually relearn to be in a more relaxed state where now that's the autopilot. So it can relearn. And I've talked about this plenty of times, and I will continue to mention this because I think it's very important that your insight, your intellectual, conceptual insight doesn't always change your symptoms. In fact, a lot of times it doesn't change your symptoms. Insight is kind of like the tipping point of the awareness for you to go deeper. But insight doesn't change your symptoms. Insight alone doesn't change your symptoms. So having an understanding of, these mechanisms, it doesn't necessarily equate regulation, feeling regulated in your system. Talking about things doesn't equate resolution. I think in some cases it can have that potential, especially when there's kind of like this, physiological catharsis when something is happening in the body as well in conjunction with talking. I think that can definitely take place, but talking alone generally does not equate resolution. And thinking with your prefrontal cortex doesn't equate your nervous system resetting and calming and relaxing, making your body feel safe. Thinking about it doesn't do that, unfortunately. Your body is like, we're not logical. The thinker brain is like, we're logical. And there's this constant tug of war. Well, when you understand how the nervous system, how emotions work, coupled with how the brain work and how they can work in conjunction, it's a beautiful thing. So you can understand something logically and still have a body that hasn't received the signal yet that it's safe now. I'm going to repeat that again. You can understand something intellectually, logically, and still have a body that hasn't received the signal yet that it's safe now. So keep that in mind. And insight happens in the thinking brain. As I mentioned, stress patterns live in the nervous system. They reside in your body, and the two communicate, but not automatically. So it's like knowing you're not in danger, but still jumping when the door slams. Just like I mentioned, I gave you the example of me, jumping when my husband opens the door drastically, or, he just opens the door and I'm like, oh, and my body or my mind knows that I'm not in danger, but my body is just jumps. So it's because your body reacts faster than your thoughts. Your body reacts faster than your thoughts. And so awareness, and a lot of this video is really about understanding, like I mentioned before, and awareness, bringing the awareness. This is opening the door. My hope is that this is opening the door for you to go deeper, for you to actually sink your teeth into this and actually begin to learn how to regulate your nervous system, how to feel safer in your body, how to purge emotions, how to actually create more spaciousness in your mind and your body, and so physical symptoms can follow for the better. I can give you example after example after example of clients I work with who have come to me for emotional healing, but physical symptomology is part of, their hurts and pains, and their hurts and pains physically start to dissipate after they start resolving and healing their emotions. It is phenomenal. It is so cool. I think it's the best thing ever. So anyway, we'll get to more of that in future videos. So regulation, when we learn how to regulate that internal state of being, it changes the signal. It's almost as if, a fire alarm isn't constantly being triggered to go off. There's no smoke, right? And the alarm is constantly going off. It's like, oh, we think that there's smoke because 10 years ago there was smoke. And so we're just any little thing, it's like, oh my gosh, it's smoke. For example, maybe you're boiling water, right, on your stove and there's some vapors. And then the fire alarm is like, oh, it looks like smoke. Oh, alarm. This is kind of what happens with your body, where your body just becomes hijacked by things that have nothing to do with the original threat that caused that alarm to go off. And yet it's just constantly going off. The alarm is going off. And you're like, can I just get a break? Right? When you learn and practice regulation, it changes the signal. It's like allowing the fire alarm to be a true fire alarm, to only go off when there's actual smoke, right? Not when there's, water boiling on the stove, not when there's, an essential oil diffuser and there's like peppermint entering the air, not when there's things that actually are not a threat. It allows your alarm system to just be an alarm system, truly not be alarming you for no reason at all, right? So, and again, regulation is also not about controlling your emotions or suppressing them or pushing them down or coercing them in a certain way. It's not about forcing yourself to calm down. I mean, even how do you just think about those two words together? Force, what comes up in your mind when you think about force? And calm. Like they don't match. You can't force calm. It doesn't work. Staying positive, that's not what regulation is about either. Now, there can be some components. I think it's helpful to have a positive mindset about things. I think it's helpful for us to reprogram our mind to fix our mind on positive things. But it's not just staying positive per se that actually regulates our body's internal state of being. So regulation is about the body sensing safety. It's like the fire alarm sensing, oh, there really is no smoke here, right? The system settling, signals softening over time. Just like I mentioned, all these different, you know, incense or, things that are, maybe in your environment that might kind of sort of look like smoke, but they're really not smoke. And the fire alarm learns like, oh, that's not smoke. Oh, that's not smoke. That's not smoke either. That's not smoke. That's not a fire. That's not a fire. That's not a fire. And it learns to just soften and quiet down and not over alarm you every single time something kind of sort of looks like smoke. The signals soften over time. And again, I'm just using that fire alarm as an illustration for you to understand that's kind of how the nervous system works, right? And so the body updates when it feels something different. When the nervous system experiences safety, the signals that it sends to the body change. So your muscles don't stay as braced anymore. They start to soften, they start to loosen, they start to, not maybe your hip flexors are a little more relaxed. I'm thinking of hip flexors because that's kind of what mine are like right now. I'm like, oh, my hip flexors are kind of speaking to me right now. I need to take a look at that. But your muscles need to, they feel like your muscles will start to, follow that sense of like, oh, we're safe here. We can relax here. And the systems in your body don't need to stay on alert all the time. So here's the big takeaway. Your symptoms are signals. They're not failures. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign that, oh, you're doing something wrong. Symptoms are signals. It's like the ping of your cell phone sending you a notification like, hey, something's going on here. Hey, here I am. Hey. hey, 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 right? It's communication, it's not punishment. It's information, it's not betrayal. So, stress, nervous system, it adapts, it creates patterns. If we learn how to regulate, that creates positive change. And let's face it, stress is a part of life, right? So, if we can learn how to do these things for ourselves, it's going to create a really big positive spaciousness in all areas of our life. So, the takeaway too is that you're not broken. Your body is simply responding. You're not broken. Your body is responding. So, just to recap some of the things that we talked about in today's video, stress doesn't just stay in your head, it shows up in the body. Physical symptoms are nervous system responses. Oftentimes, right? They're the body's way of communicating, hey, something's amiss here. And your body isn't broken, it has adapted. Symptoms are signals, not signs of failure. They're not failures, they're signals. Up next, we're going to be talking about when stress shows up as physical symptoms. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what's called psychosomatics, also known as a mind-body connection. We'll talk a little bit more about that and get a little more in depth about, the top physical symptoms that show up and what they might indicate. So, in the comments below, let me know if this has been helpful. And if you have any questions or comments about anything that I covered, feel free to drop that in the comments below as well. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.